The orphan boy that made a wish on Christmas Day. What Santa did would keep you speechless. Hook. Picture this. Christmas morning, 1998. A 9-year-old boy kneeling beside his bed in a cold orphanage room, whispering a prayer no child should ever have to make. He wasn't asking for toys. He wasn't asking for a new family. He was asking for the one thing nobody wanted him to know. The truth about why his parents never came home. What happened next would take 23 years to fully understand, and when it finally did, it would destroy everything this town thought it knew about that night. This is a story about a wish that should never have been answered, but someone heard it, and what they did with it will leave you questioning everything. Story begins. Before we go deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. December 1998, Pinewood, a small town in Ohio where everyone knew everyone, and secrets were supposed to stay buried under the weight of neighborly smiles and church potlucks. St. Mary's Home for Children sat on the edge of town, a 2-story brick building that had housed forgotten kids for over 40 years. The paint was peeling, the heating barely worked, but it was home to 17 children that winter, including a boy we'll call Michael Parker, 9 years old, brown hair that fell over his eyes, quiet to the point where some staff thought he might be mute. He'd only been there for 6 weeks. His parents, David and Rachel Parker, had died in a car accident on Halloween night. Head-on collision with a drunk driver on Route 18. That's what the police report said. That's what the local paper printed. That's what the funeral director repeated to anyone who asked. Michael didn't cry at the funeral. He didn't cry when they packed up his house. He didn't cry when they drove him to St. Mary's and walked him to a room with 2 bunk beds and a window that wouldn't close all the way. He just watched. And he remembered, building the character. The other kids learned quickly to leave him alone, not because he was mean, but because he had this way of looking at you like he could see straight through whatever lie you were telling. The staff tried. Mrs. Brennan, the head caretaker, brought him hot chocolate every night. Mr. Alvarez, the part-time counselor, sat with him during quiet hours and asked how he was feeling. Michael would nod. Sometimes he'd say fine, in a voice so soft you had to lean in to hear it. But mostly, he wrote. He had a notebook, spiral-bound with a blue cover, that he carried everywhere. He wrote about his mom's laugh, about how his dad used to let him stay up late on Fridays to watch old westerns, about the smell of pancakes on Sunday mornings, about the last thing his mom said to him before she left that night. "We'll be home before you know it, sweetheart. Keep the porch light on." The porch light stayed on for 3 days before someone finally turned it off. Michael wrote about that too. On December 23rd, 2 days before Christmas, the orphanage put up a small tree in the chapel room. It was artificial, pre-lit, with ornaments donated by the Baptist church across the street. The kids were encouraged to hang their wishes on paper stars. Most of them asked for bikes, video games, families. Michael didn't hang his wish on the tree. He folded it into a small envelope, wrote "Santa" on the front in careful letters, and tucked it under the tree skirt where no one would see it. The wish inside that envelope was a single piece of notebook paper. It read, "Dear Santa, I know you're not real. My dad told me when I was 7, and I wasn't mad about it. But if anyone is listening, if there's anyone out there who can hear this, I need to know something. Everyone says my mom and dad died because someone was drunk and couldn't stay in their lane. But that doesn't make sense. My dad always took Miller Road home. Always. It's longer, but safer. He said Route 18 was for idiots in a hurry. So why were they on Route 18? And why did my mom call me at 8:47 that night and say, if anything happens, remember we love you, and then hang up before I could ask what she meant? No one will tell me. The police won't talk to me. Mrs. Brennan says I'm too young to understand. But I'm not stupid. Something happened. And I don't want toys. I don't want a new family. I just want the truth. Please. Michael. Christmas Eve came and went. The kids opened gifts, donated by local families. Michael got a sweater, 2 sizes too big, and a pack of colored pencils. He said thank you. He wore the sweater. He didn't touch the pencils. That night, after everyone went to bed, a man named Thomas Gray was doing his rounds. Thomas worked maintenance at St. Mary's 3 nights a week. 52 years old, widowed, no kids. He'd taken the job 5 years earlier because it kept him busy and the pay was enough to cover his rent and his regrets. Thomas had a routine. Check the locks, turn off the lights in the common areas, make sure the heaters were running. On his way through the chapel, he noticed the tree skirt was bunched up on one side. He knelt down to fix it and saw the envelope, the discovery. He almost threw it away. It wasn't sealed. The flap was just tucked in. He pulled out the letter and read it under the glow of the chapel's exit sign. His hands started shaking by the second paragraph. Thomas Gray knew the Parkers. Not well, but he knew them. David Parker had been a quality control inspector at the manufacturing plant where Thomas used to work before it downsized in '96. They'd shared a lunch table a few times, talked about football, about how the town was changing, and Thomas knew something else, something he'd kept to himself for 2 months because it wasn't his business and he didn't want trouble. On Halloween night, hours before the accident, Thomas had been driving home from his sister's house in the next county. He'd stopped at a gas station just off Route 18 to grab coffee and use the bathroom. While he was inside, he saw David and Rachel Parker pulled over in the parking lot. They weren't alone. There was another car parked next to theirs, a black sedan. 2 men standing outside, talking to David through the driver's side window. The conversation looked tense. Rachel was on her phone. One of the men kept glancing around like he was worried someone was watching. Thomas didn't think much of it at the time. People have arguments. People have business. He paid for his coffee and left. 3 hours later, the Parkers were dead. Thomas had told himself it was a coincidence, that he was imagining things, that the accident was just what everyone said it was, a tragedy caused by a drunk driver who'd already been arrested and charged. But he hadn't been able to shake the image of those 2 men. And now, holding this letter from a 9-year-old boy who was asking the exact same questions Thomas had been too afraid to ask, he realized he couldn't stay quiet anymore. The investigation begins. The day after Christmas, Thomas went to the Pinewood Police Department. He asked to speak to someone about the Parker case. The officer at the front desk, a young guy named Riley, looked at him like he'd just asked to reopen the Kennedy assassination. That case is closed, sir. Driver was charged with vehicular manslaughter. He's serving 8 years. Thomas nodded. I understand, but I think there might be more to it. Officer Riley sighed. Do you have new evidence? I saw them that night. Before the accident, they were meeting with someone. Riley's expression didn't change. Lots of people meet with lots of people. Doesn't mean anything. They looked scared. Sir, with all due respect, you're remembering a random interaction from 2 months ago and trying to make it fit a narrative. The case is closed. If you have actual evidence, documented evidence, you can submit it through the proper channels. Otherwise, I'd suggest letting the family rest in peace. Thomas left the station feeling smaller than when he walked in, but he didn't stop. Over the next 2 weeks, he started asking questions, carefully, quietly. He went to the diner where Rachel Parker used to work as a weekend hostess. The owner, a woman named Diane, remembered her well. Sweet girl, hardworking. She quit about a month before she died, though. Said she needed to focus on family. I thought maybe she was pregnant again or something. But she seemed stressed. Not happy stressed, worried stressed. Thomas asked if Rachel had mentioned anything unusual. Diane thought for a moment, then said, actually, yeah. One time, she came in on her day off, just to grab coffee, and she was on the phone in the parking lot. I only heard part of it because I was taking out the trash. But she said something like, I don't care what they told you, we're not doing it. Then she saw me and hung up real quick. I didn't think anything of it. Uncovering the threads. Thomas went to the plant where David Parker had worked. Most of the old crew had moved on after the downsizing, but he managed to track down a guy named Ken Simmons, who'd been David's supervisor. They met at a bar in the next town over. Ken was halfway through his second beer when Thomas brought up the Parkers. Ken's face changed. He set his glass down slowly. "Why are you asking about David?" "I think there's more to what happened than people know." Ken stared at him for a long moment, then leaned back in his chair. "You're not wrong." He explained that about 3 months before the accident, David had discovered something during a routine quality check. A batch of components that didn't match the specs. They were substandard, potentially dangerous, but they'd been approved and shipped anyway. David flagged it. He filed a report. He went to management, and management told him to drop it. They said it was a clerical error, Ken said, that it had been corrected, but David didn't believe them. He started digging. He found emails, approval signatures, money changing hands. It wasn't just a mistake. It was deliberate. They were cutting costs, using cheaper materials, and falsifying the safety reports. "What did he do?" Thomas asked. Ken shook his head. "He told me he was going to report it to the state, maybe even federal regulators. He said Rachel was scared, but that it was the right thing to do. I told him to be careful." 2 weeks later, he and Rachel were dead. "Did you tell the police this?" "I tried," Ken said quietly. "I called the tip line. I told them David had been investigating something at work. They said they'd look into it. As far as I know, they never did." The wall of silence. Thomas tried to access the police report on the accident. It was sealed. He tried to request the records from the plant. He was told they were part of an ongoing internal audit and unavailable to outside parties. He tried calling the state regulatory office. They said they had no record of any complaint filed by David Parker. Every door he tried to open was locked. Every question he asked was met with silence or deflection. He started to feel like he was going crazy, like maybe Officer Riley was right and he was just seeing patterns where none existed. But then, in mid-January, something happened that changed everything. Thomas came home from his shift at the orphanage to find his apartment door slightly ajar. He lived alone. He always locked his door. He pushed it open carefully, heart pounding, and stepped inside. Nothing was missing. Nothing was broken. But sitting on his kitchen table was a manila envelope with no return address. Inside was a single photograph. It showed David and Rachel Parker standing outside the manufacturing plant, talking to a man in a suit. The man's face was partially obscured, but you could see enough. He was older, 50s, with graying hair, and a watch that probably cost more than Thomas made in a month. On the back of the photo, in handwriting Thomas didn't recognize, someone had written, "Stop asking questions." Thomas didn't sleep that night. He sat at his kitchen table with the photo in front of him, trying to decide what to do. He thought about Michael, about that letter, about the fact that a 9-year-old kid was asking for the truth, and the only person trying to give it to him was a middle-aged maintenance worker who was clearly in over his head. He thought about calling the police again, but if someone had broken into his apartment to leave that photo, then someone was watching him. Someone with enough power to know what he was doing and enough reach to get into his home. The breaking point. The next day, Thomas went back to St. Mary's for his shift. He avoided the chapel. He avoided Michael. He did his job, kept his head down, and tried to pretend everything was fine. But when he was locking up the supply closet on the second floor, he heard footsteps behind him. He turned around and saw Michael standing there, holding his blue notebook. "You read my letter," Michael said. It wasn't a question. Thomas froze. I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do. I saw you take it. I was awake that night. I watched you through the door." Thomas felt his chest tighten. "Michael, Did you find anything?" the boy asked. His voice was steady, but his eyes were desperate. "Did you find out why they were on Route 18? Thomas looked at this kid, this 9-year-old who'd already lost everything, and he realized he couldn't lie to him, not after everything. "I'm trying," Thomas said quietly, "but it's complicated." "What does that mean?" "It means that sometimes people don't want the truth to come out, and when that happens, they make it very hard to find." Michael stared at him for a long moment, then opened his notebook and tore out a page. He handed it to Thomas. On it, he'd written a phone number and a name. Detective Susan Holder, State Police. My mom wrote this down the week before she died, Michael said. I found it in her purse when they gave me her stuff. I don't know why she had it, but maybe it means something. Thomas took the paper with shaking hands. Where did you find this? In the pocket of her jacket, the one she was wearing that night. The turning point. Thomas called the number the next morning. A woman answered on the third ring. Holder. Detective Holder. My name is Thomas Gray. I'm calling about David and Rachel Parker. There was a pause. Then, how did you get this number? Their son gave it to me. He found it in his mother's belongings. Another pause, longer this time. I can't talk about this over the phone. Can you meet me? They met 2 days later at a rest stop halfway between Pinewood and the state capitol. Detective Holder was in her early 40s, sharp-eyed, with the kind of face that had seen too much and stopped being surprised by any of it. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. David Parker contacted me 6 weeks before he died, she said. He said he had evidence of fraudulent safety certifications at the plant where he worked, components that were supposed to meet federal standards, but didn't. He believed they were being used in government contracts, military equipment, infrastructure projects. If he was right, we're talking about a major scandal, millions of dollars, criminal charges, prison time for multiple people. Did you investigate? Thomas asked. I started to, but before I could get very far, David and Rachel were killed. The case was ruled an accident, local jurisdiction. I had no grounds to push it further, and then she trailed off. Then what? Then someone from my own department told me to drop it, said it was a waste of resources, that David Parker was just a disgruntled employee making noise. I didn't believe that, but I also didn't have enough to fight back. So, you just gave up? Thomas said, unable to keep the anger out of his voice. Holder's jaw tightened. No, I kept copies of everything David sent me. Emails, documents, photos. I kept them in case I ever got the chance to reopen it. And now, apparently, I have that chance. The evidence. Over the next 3 weeks, Detective Holder quietly reopened her investigation. She pulled the original accident report and found inconsistencies that had been overlooked or ignored. The drunk driver, a man named Eugene Fields, had a blood alcohol level of 0.11. Legally drunk, yes. But witnesses at the bar where he'd been drinking said he'd left around 7:30 p.m., a full hour before the accident. That should have given him time to sober up slightly, but his BAC was tested at the scene and came back higher than it should have been. Holder requested the toxicology report and found something else. Traces of a sedative in his system. Not enough to incapacitate him, but enough to impair his reaction time significantly. Eugene Fields claimed he didn't remember taking anything. He didn't remember much about that night at all. Holder tracked down the black sedan Thomas had seen at the gas station. It took weeks of cross-referencing traffic cameras and gas station receipts, but she eventually identified it as a company car registered to a consulting firm that did business with the manufacturing plant. The two men Thomas had seen talking to David Parker were private security contractors. One of them had a military background. The other had a record. Intimidation, assault, charges that had been dropped or pleaded down. Holder brought all of this to her captain. He told her to be careful, that she was making serious accusations, that if she was wrong, it would end her career. She told him she wasn't wrong. And then, finally, she got the break she needed. One of the men from the black sedan, the one with the record, had been arrested 2 weeks earlier on an unrelated charge. He was looking at serious time. Holder went to see him in county lockup. She laid out everything she had. She told him he could either help her or go down with everyone else. He talked. The truth revealed. David and Rachel Parker had been murdered. Not directly, but close enough. The night of the accident, they'd been on their way to meet Detective Holder at a secure location. They were going to hand over the evidence David had compiled, but someone found out. The two men in the black sedan had followed them. They'd forced them off Miller Road and onto Route 18, where traffic was heavier and an accident would be easier to stage. They'd called in a favor with Eugene Fields, a man with gambling debts and a drinking problem who was desperate enough to do what he was told. Fields was supposed to sideswipe them, scare them, make them crash in a way that looked accidental, but it went wrong. The impact was harder than planned. David lost control. The car flipped. They both died on impact. Fields panicked. He'd been given a sedative to make sure his story would hold up if he was tested, something to make him seem convincingly drunk and disoriented. The plan was for him to take the fall, serve a few years, and get paid when he got out. But Fields wasn't supposed to kill them. That changed everything. The men in the black sedan reported back to their employer, the head of the consulting firm, a man named Richard Dalton, who had been facilitating the fraudulent certifications for years. Dalton made sure the investigation stayed local, stayed simple, and stayed closed. He paid off the right people, he buried the right documents, and he made sure that anyone who asked too many questions understood what would happen if they didn't stop. But he didn't count on a 9-year-old boy and a maintenance worker who refused to let it go. In March of 1999, 3 months after Michael wrote his letter, Detective Holder arrested Richard Dalton and 4 others on charges of fraud, conspiracy, and 2 counts of second-degree murder. The story made national news. The plant was shut down. The contracts were investigated. Families of soldiers who'd been killed using the faulty equipment filed lawsuits. It was massive. The aftermath. But Michael never knew. Not then. Detective Holder tried to tell him. She went to St. Mary's with Thomas in early April after the arrests had been made public. But by then, Michael was gone. He'd been adopted by a family in Pennsylvania 2 weeks earlier. The records were sealed. Holder and Thomas tried to track him down, but adoption records in 1999 weren't easy to access, especially for non-family members. They left messages with the adoption agency. They wrote letters to the family, hoping they'd pass them on to Michael when he was older, but they never heard back. Thomas went back to his life. He kept working at St. Mary's for another 5 years before retiring. He thought about Michael often, wondered if he ever found out the truth, wondered if it would have mattered. Detective Holder was promoted. She built a career on that case, and others like it. But she kept a copy of Michael's letter in her desk drawer, a reminder of why she did what she did. And Michael grew up. He was raised by a kind family who loved him and gave him stability. He went to college. He became a journalist. He spent his career investigating corruption, asking the questions no one else wanted to ask, and refusing to accept easy answers. He didn't talk about his parents often. He'd made peace with their deaths the way you make peace with things you can't change. He told himself they'd been in the wrong place at the wrong time, and that was all there was to it. Until December 2021, 23 years after he wrote that letter. The final revelation. Michael, now 32 years old, living in Chicago, received a package at his office. No return address. Inside was a manila envelope. Inside the envelope was his letter, the one he'd written when he was 9, the one he'd tucked under the Christmas tree and thought no one had ever read. Attached to it was a note from Thomas Gray, who'd passed away 3 months earlier from a heart attack. The note explained everything, what Thomas had done, what he'd found, what had happened because of that letter, and included with the note was a flash drive containing all the evidence, police reports, court transcripts, news articles, everything. Michael sat in his office and read through it all. He read about Richard Dalton, about Eugene Fields, about the faulty components and the soldiers who died because of it. He read about Detective Holder's investigation, about the arrests, about the trial. He read about how his parents had been trying to do the right thing and had been killed for it. And he read about Thomas Gray, a maintenance worker who could have thrown away a child's letter and gone on with his life, but chose not to. Michael cried for the first time since he was 9 years old, not because his parents were dead, he'd known that, but because they'd died as heroes, because their deaths had meant something. because someone had cared enough to answer a wish that should never have come true. He published a story about it 6 months later. It won awards. It brought renewed attention to the case and led to additional investigations into other companies doing similar things. But more than that, it gave Michael the answer he'd been searching for his whole life. His parents didn't leave him because they were careless. They left him because they were brave. Closing. So here's the question I want you to think about. If you found that letter, what would you have done? Would you have thrown it away? Would you have ignored it because it wasn't your problem? Or would you have done what Thomas Gray did and risked everything to give a child the truth? Michael Parker's wish came true, but it took 23 years and cost a good man his peace of mind and eventually his life from the stress and fear he carried. Was it worth it? I think Michael would say yes. I think Thomas would say yes. But I want to know what you think. Drop a comment below. Tell me, should the truth always be revealed, no matter the cost? And if you were in Thomas Gray's position, would you have had the courage to answer that wish? If this story moved you, hit the like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe, because next week I'm bringing you another true story that will challenge everything you believe about coincidence and fate. Some wishes don't grant miracles, they expose them, and sometimes that's even more powerful.